Hotep. I'm Dr. Gloria L, host and producer of OmniU Presents the H3O Art of Life show. This program is called A Gathering of Griots, from human rights to civil rights. We are very happy that these griots have agreed to come and to bring you the messages that are given on your program today. The logo for the H3O Art of Life show was designed by my daughter, who is a renowned artist and who is very busy but took the time to do this for her mother, and I want to publicly thank her for her painting that she turned into a logo. I would like now to introduce my friend, my fellow, my neighbor, my best friend forever, and a lot of things that we call each other in private, Dr. Yvonne Blakey, who will now ask you to stand while we give some attention to the sacred part of this program.
Let us bow our heads and become still from within. We gather here today in humble praise and thanksgiving. We acknowledge and praise the one and only ultimate reality, which is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. We recognize that this great presence is evenly present everywhere throughout the universe and in our individual lives. We thank this great power for giving us the health, the strength, the ability to have gathered here today. We are thankful for our lovely moderator, hostess, and producer, Dr. Gloria Peace, the staff of the Woodson Library, the entire production crew, and all those who have worked so diligently over the last few weeks to bring this program to fruition. We are thankful for our guest speakers who are willing to share their wisdom, their insights, and their love for humanity with us. May we all be blessed, strengthened, and encouraged by what we hear and what we experience here today. And at the end of this program, may we each have an increased commitment to our destiny, and may we have an increase in our wisdom, our understanding, and our love for all mankind. And so it is.
I am an African, and I am among African people. And by acknowledging that, I ask my elders if I may have permission to speak. Thank you. And to not lose fact that this is a teachable moment. For those who may have thought what that was all about, it was not about grandstanding, it was about not even that, it was just about setting the atmosphere right. I'm still young enough to remember the mud between my toes. When Muddy and Papa took us to town, they gave us instructions. Pay attention, and don't you act no fool today, boy. Emmett Till is real for us. We witnessed that even recently with Trayvon Martin. But we don't play with eldership. You acknowledge your elders because they're on that rung of ladder going to the next side, the next level. And when they get over to the other side, you want them to give a good report that you've practiced your way. And so having gotten permission, I now ask that you allow me to assume this posture of reverence and deference to the absolute, but to our ancestors as well. For if we stand tall, it is because we stand on their shoulders. This is a participatory ritual, so I may call out the word libation, but if you have a Kemetic understanding, I may say Hotep, and you may say that. I may even say, or you may say Ashe, if you have a Yoruba understanding. You may even come from out of the Congo, or even among the Zulu people and say Yebo. Or you just may be a brother or sister from the struggle and believe and feel what Brother Kwesi is saying, and you may just say, right on, Brother Kwesi, I feel you. But nonetheless, it's participatory. And so, we call out to you, you great ancestors, whose names we do not know, but we know you existed, because every one of us assembled here on this day is some manifestation of some great African that walked upon the continent of Abukalan, Africa, however you acknowledge it, it is home for us, and said, Yes, we are human. You great ancestors who outstretched arms beckon each and every one of us from beneath the Atlantic Ocean to reclaim our bird of passage in the spirit of Sankofa. 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 You great ancestors, come, have your drink on this day, as we all say in pour libation. We call out to you, ancestors, you who have left us the perfect examples of womanhood and manhood. Yes, come, Ya Asantawa, be with us here today. Hatan Sashuk, come, be with us here today. Have your drink, Harriet. Come in, Harriet. Yes, Sojourner, be with us on this day. Bookman and Cecilia Fatima, come be with us on this day. Zuni, yes, you, come be with us. Yes, Nat Turner, come. Come in, Gabriel Proxa, Denmark Vesey. Yes, come have your drink on this day, as we all say in pour libation. We call out to those ancestors who are most recent in our memories. Yes, Baba Jake, come have your drink with us today. Bobby Wright, come, Chartice McIntyre. Barbara Sizemore, come be with us on this night. Yes, you ancient jollies, you griots, we call out to you. Claude McCabe, come be with us here on this day. Langston Hughes, come have your drink on this day. Call out the names, you know who they are. Call them out. Yes, tell them, yes, come have your drink on this day. Yes, yes. Asa Hilliard, come have your drink on this day, as we all say in pour libation. Now we call forth from our own lines and lineages. You know, the great mamas, the great papas, those who bosoms you have returned to here on this day. Call them out from your line and lineage. Yes. It's only when we stop calling the names that we cease to exist. They speak through us, they speak through us. Call out the names from your line and lineage. Yes. Yes, come have your drink, as we all say in pour libation. And now we call forth the unborn child. The unborn child. Because the unborn child is the absolute way of saying that life will and life must go on. We are an African people. Yes, we will continue. We're still here. But that unborn child will come in its own time. And when he comes, or when she comes, it will then hold all of us assembled here in this sacred space today accountable. That we dared to fight, we dared to struggle, we even dared to have the will that life was to be freer and fuller for them than we could ever imagine. Come, unborn child, come in your own time and have your drink. As we all say in pour libation. And if we truly, truly believe in our hearts that we are an African people, then everything we've uttered here today will manifest itself. Among our brothers and sisters in Mali, the Dogon people, we have a word called the Nomo, which means sacred speech. In ancient Kemet, Tahuti gave us thought, sacred speech. We enunciate it, we pronounce it, we communicate it, and it manifests. If we want more love, then we must start speaking more love to each other. We want more respect, then we have to start speaking it. We have to be the examples to sample. We're not boys in the hoods. We're not thugs for life. It ain't a G thing. It's an African thing. We have to understand that. And if we truly, truly believe it, then we will be the African people that we were destined to be and become. In the spirit of Capra and Ma'at, continue to do justice. Thank you.
Once upon a time, we had our land, our culture, and our minds. Surely we had tribes, we all lived right there in Africa. Things began to change. There were forces that divided us, spread throughout the world, We are unsure about our heritage. Umoja is the message, a call for unity. From the 7 Principles by Kwame Steve Cobb and Shabanduko Cobb. From The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, the Negro's mind has been brought under the control of his oppressor. The problem of holding the Negro down, therefore, is easily solved. When you control a man's thinking, you don't have to worry about his actions. Leading the intellectual warriors who are challenging the control of the minds of African people is my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased.
My task today is to speak to you about the sequester of Kemet. Now, a sequester is the idea of isolating something, of hiding it away. And much of what we have known and should know has been hidden from us. I want to start out by reading to you an excerpt from the Middle East Times by Zahi Hawass, who is the supreme authority of antiquities in what is called Egypt today. And he wrote an article entitled Tutankhamun Was Not Black. I want to read to you what he said. Zahi Hawass, Egyptian antiquities supreme head, insisted Tuesday that Tutankhamun was not black, despite calls by U.S. black activists to recognize the boy king's dark skin color. Tutankhamun was not black, and the portrayals of ancient Egyptian civilization as black has no element of truth in it, Hawass told reporters. Egyptians are not Arabs and are not Africans, despite the fact that Egypt is in Africa. And I quote. This is the type of nonsense we have to deal with. First off, let us make it real clear that, of course, Egypt is not the name of the country in ancient times.
Absolutely.
It was called Kemet. Kemet means the black community. Now, I know a lot of you read in books where it says the black land, but if you know the ancient Egyptian language, Medu Neter, which means divine speech, not hieroglyphics, then you would know that the word for land, or ta, does not exist in the word Kemet. So it could not possibly mean black land. And of course we see that word in many ideas like Ta Seti, the land of the blow, Ta Mary, the beloved land, Ta Wheat, the two lands, and the symbol Ta is in those words. But in the word Kemet, the symbol for town or community is there. So it means the black community or the black town. Furthermore, when the ancient people of Kemet described themselves, they described themselves by the term Kemet-EU. Very similar to Kemet, but the EU is on. And now the distinction there is that they have what's called a determinative. The determinative tells us something. It's a symbol that tells us something about that, what that word means. Now, in the word Kemet, we have the symbol for town or community. It's a circle with lines going through it, implying that this is a town or community with the streets going through it. In the word Kemet-EU, we have a little different thing. We have a man and a woman, implying that not that this is the black town or the black community, but that this means black people. So I don't know what he's talking about. All those Egyptologists know that. They all study Medu Neter. Even in their most recognized book in what they call the dictionary, Faulkner's Middle Egyptian Dictionary, when you get to the word Kemet-EU in the dictionary, it has the word Egyptian. Now, what type of game are they trying to play? They're trying to play the game on the mind. And so what we want to do is clarify all of that. We want you to know that Kemet was an African civilization in the Nile Valley that influenced other African civilizations throughout Africa. They don't like to tell you that. But there's a very strange thing that occurs in the 7th century. In the 7th century, we begin to see the increase in civilizations and populations all throughout Central and West Africa. Now, how did that just all of a sudden happen? Well, the way that they describe it in the history books is that it's called mysterious. It's always mysterious. No, it's not. We know what happens. Because when invaders came in, the people began to move south. And as they came in more, they started moving west. Now, this is very, very important for us to know. And I can, and I have a very short time, so I got a lot of ground to cover in a very short time. But I will tell you this, that this is no secret. And the secret is out now because there are many of us who read and teach the language. We read the monuments, we read the text. We know exactly what it says. So they can't just pull the wool over our eyes anymore. We also know that they made great contributions to Western civilization. It is no secret whatsoever that Pythagoras studied in Kemet. Thales, who was recognized as the first philosopher among the Greeks, and he wasn't even a Greek, lived in Asia Minor, what they call Turkey today. He says, I, Thales, went to Egypt and studied geometry. Pythagoras wasn't even alive, but they call Pythagoras the father of geometry. How can that be? Plato spent 20 years in Egypt studying, who taught Aristotle. It is no secret that many of their ideas, many of their thoughts came directly from Kemet. When Plato wrote the Republic, Plato is giving you an idea of the construction of civilization in the Nile Valley. What you think he just woke up, as I like to teach my students in philosophy, because I teach philosophy to white students. I tell them, what do you think? That all of a sudden, Plato and Aristotle and these guys woke up in the middle of the night and all of a sudden they had wisdom? Impossible. Furthermore, we know for a fact that until the 4th century, the 5th century, Athens didn't even exist. So what happened? The whole world sat around being dumb until the 5th century BC when they showed up? No, because we know for a fact that the people from Kemet colonized much of the Isles of the Greeks. Do you know that there was an Egyptian priestess named Fantasia? Fantasia is the one that they acquired the Iliad and the Odyssey from. And let me tell you something about Homer, who they think was an individual. You got to remember that the Greeks didn't think philosophy. The Greeks were poets. They were what I call the spoken word artists of their day. They went around and gathered together a whole lot of rap, or hip-hop as they call it today, and put it all together and produced this story called the Iliad and the Odyssey. So there was no Homer. They were called the Homerides. They were like a band of bards that went around telling stories. Because that was the reason why they wanted to get rid of Socrates. Socrates was accused of teaching foreign ideas to the youth of Athens. And what exactly was he teaching them? He was teaching them the thought of Kemet. The ideas about how to act right and be treated right. And this was a danger to the Athenian population, so they wanted to get rid of him. That's the same thing that's happening today. Why is it that we're not allowed to teach these ideas in the school among our children? And some of our own people are the ones that say, well, you don't need to teach all of that to our kids. Our kids don't need to know that. You know that black stuff? Well, I don't know a situation where whites don't want to talk about their ancestors. Not one. In my doctoral program, I have a student, a girl was in my class, Becky. Becky never failed to constantly remind us that her parents came here on the Mayflower. You understand? Yeah. But we don't want to talk about Africa. You know why? There was an organization called the Mississippi Valley Historical Association that existed around 1910 or so. And this was run by Southern segregationists. And these Southern segregationists decided on what should be taught as history in the United States. The organization of African historians in the 1960s. During that time, they had a historian by the name of Ulrich Phillips. Ulrich Phillips wrote the first book on slavery in the United States called American Negro Slavery. It was all about the benefits and the greatness of white slave owners and how we were so happy to be their slaves. That stayed the standard text on black history in terms of slavery in the United States for damn near 40 years until the 1960s. And even then, when Ken Stamp writes The Peculiar Institution and other people came around and started writing about the history of blacks, they wrote about slavery because they were taught that you cannot talk about anything else
but slavery. They didn't want to go back into the 19th century, talk about Martin Delany or people like Antonio Furman or people like Delany and people like Edward Wilmot Blythe. People like that who were right. George Washington Williams. All of these people are speaking about our relationship to Egypt. But they're saying we don't have no history and it's not written, that we don't even have history. And it's interesting to keep your history locked in slavery. Why? If you keep your history locked in slavery, what child wants to know about something negative like that? But you want to teach them about the greatness. You want to teach them about how it was that our people moved from the Nile Valley, how the Nile Valley was the foundation of Western civilization. The foundation. If you go back and check even further, during the time of the Renaissance, I don't know how much time I got. How much time I got? Am I doing good? Okay, cool. All right. In the time of the Renaissance, during the time of Cosimo de' Medici, you know, many of those Medicis, you know, they look like us. They have an art exhibit at the Art Institute about 10 years ago on the Medicis. If you had went and saw it, you would have been like, my goodness. All right. But during the time of Cosimo de' Medici, they were in the process of translating Plato's Republic. And what happened is when they started getting a hold of these particular texts from the Nile Valley that they call Hermetic texts, because you see Hermes is nothing but one of the Greek names that the Romans called Mercury and that the ancient people in the Nile Valley called Tahuti or Jehudi. And he was the founder of wisdom and knowledge. They were acquiring this knowledge. And when he got it, he said, you know what? Stop translating Plato. It's in the text. It's there. I want you to start focusing in on this, these Hermetic texts, because they said this is where Plato got his knowledge from. This is where Moses got his knowledge from. So this is what we want to start learning. And from that, they established the first early universities in Europe. It is in Plato's work, the Timaeus, where Solon, one of the 7 sages of Greece, comes to the Egyptian priests to find out how old they are, because they forgot. And the Egyptian priest tells Solon, you Greeks are nothing but children. Every time you lose your mind, you come back to us and ask us where you come from. And we tell you. Because they kept the record, because they were so ancient, and people recognized them as such. Not only that, if you look at Kemet, do you know that the first ideas and thoughts about Christianity start in the Nile Valley? We've been saying this for a long time. Your first Christian school of thought, the Didascalia, was in Alexandria in Egypt, taught by Clement of Alexandria.
We all know the words to lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. And now we bring to you Dr. Asantewa Opong Wadie to talk about history interrupted, stony the road we trod.
I would like to give a special thank you to Dr. Gloria Peace and to acknowledge my elders before I start speaking, because I am truly a student of this information. What I have is a passion to let other students know. So on my journey, I'm here to learn and I'm here to teach. My goal today is to talk about the Ma'afa, this time of the big trouble. And I was in St. Croix recently, where the director of African Studies there said, can you call it the Manganese, a word that means the time of calculated pain, the time when somebody deliberately went to wipe the pages clean of our history. And I reflected on that, and it needs to be added. We need to continue to formulate new words. We can't stop at Ma'afa. We need new language. We need a host of new words to talk about this experience as we get to learn about it in more detail. And so I'm going to pick up where Dr. Ben Levy left off. One of the things that he said that was vitally important is that the culture that came out of the Nile Valley was so pristine, was so advanced, that all other cultures in the world are based on it. And naturally, it attracted greedy people, it attracted invaders, it attracted heartless people. And as they began to come into the Nile Valley, we get the running of African people south, going further towards the Horn of Africa into Central Africa. We also get the running of African people west. And Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop says we see the Empire of Ghana just take off like a shooting star because people are running literally. So when we talk to our students and our loved ones about how wonderful the Nile Valley was, we also have to say that this wonderfulness attracted a lot of pain to Africa. And how did we fall on our knees? Because as Cheikh Anta Diop reminds us, when the oppressors came, when the Portuguese first came, they are the first ones in now from Europe to set up camp or slave dungeons. They found us in a running state. We weren't settled okay and able to take on the enemy. And if you're running, just as we see refugees today, you're not in your strongest state. We were already compromised. And so I want to back up just a little bit and mention to you that Islam in its nascent form came into Ethiopia seeking refuge. The Prophet Muhammad actually sends his followers there saying the persecution is too much. Go to Ethiopia, those people will protect you. They are a noble people, an honest and upright, God-fearing people. Well, they come into Ethiopia and they so enjoy their stay that they come back less than a quarter century later as conquerors. So it is not coincident that the whole top north side part of Africa is filled with their families. They come to take it. It's lovely. Why not have it? Right? And so they began a slave trade that we really talk about, a ma'afa that we really talk about, coming from North and East and even West Africa. So by the time the Portuguese get there, there's already the blueprint for what needs to happen. This has already happened in history, right? And I had the privilege of being in Ghana and seeing Elmina, the mine, the first dungeon set up for the holding of African people. These people who were on the run, able to be taken advantage of. I was able to see it. And one of the things the historians say is that they didn't come here and build this huge building here and start to take people overnight. Sometimes they waited 200 years. They had time to intermarry, produce mixed race children, and mixed loyalties come with mixed race, at least in that time period, right? And then produce a set of people who will listen to them. It's almost 200 years before the Portuguese began to pick people. By this time, they have made friends with core people, the people in power. And I like what Dr. Maulana Karenga says. There are three people we have to name in this process, in the process of the Ma'afa. There are perpetuators, there are collaborators, and then there are victims. Now, a perpetuator is someone who is responsible for the process, who has sat and thought about it, funded it, paid other people, bought the boats, bought the chains, made the chains, set up plans for where these people will go. A collaborator is someone who is usually squoozing against their will to cooperate, at least in this case. Now, when I first come, hi, I know you got some prisoners. Look, I just need those people. Do you mind? What? I can give you a nice price for it. Okay, you can have these people. But then what happens after that? I come back and I say, you know what? I just armed your enemy over there. I know he's your enemy. you need arms, and I'm only willing to give it for people. And Chillington says, it is the gun that gave us Africa. It's the gun. I set you up against each other. It's the whole idea of divide and rule. And pretty soon, I'm in there and I'm lost. One of the only pieces of primary source information that we get from a ruler from the Congo comes from King Alfonso, who writes a letter and says, look, I agree to give you some people. Now you're taking my noble people. Now you are taking my family members and the family members of the people who I rule with. So we can see that this was a process that started seemingly benign, but got way, way out of hand. And we know also, I love to have a map when I have this conversation, but in the absence of a map, let's just think about it. Only 4% of the people who left Africa actually made it to the United States. 96% of the people who survive are in the Caribbean and South America. There's no such thing as being non-Pan-African. What are you doing? You're an isolated finger that can be easily broken off. The bulk of our family is in the Caribbean and South America. And we are naive if we sit here in the United States and think that, oh, we're okay, we're strong. Our numbers are actually going down. And we need to connect with our brothers and sisters in the wider Americas. And we need to keep in mind that the gentleman who writes the book, Breaking the Chain, says from the very first day they took the very first African. We get records in Africa of African people running to the slave dungeons and saying, you know, beating down the doors, waging war, saying, give me back my relatives. This whole idea, like, those people over there, they sold us. One that I confront all the time in the classroom, false, false. You do have collaborators. This wouldn't have worked without people on the continent of Africa collaborating with the perpetuators of this system. You do have collaborators, but the people themselves, the bulk of the people over there are suffering the loss of a mother, a brother, a sister, an aunt, an uncle, themselves in many cases. Professor Akujezi told me that his father was fighting this idea, or maybe father or grandfather, I can't remember specifically, and was taken himself. So we've got to bring the African family back together with this information. And then I wanted to say, we recently did this workshop at Dusabo Museum where we looked at the Ma'afa. And one of the things I learned sitting there was listening to Dr. Hunter Adams say, let's not call this slavery. You know, let's call it a criminal labor extraction scheme. And I love it, and I'll do that. I want to add to that, though, not only a labor extraction, a cultural and economic and social extraction scheme. These great shining cities that you see in London, United States, in Brazil, that's you. That's your labor. That's your investment in a system. Listen, there's no civilization that can thrive without agriculture. And the European knew this. They were fully aware of it, and they knew that agriculture was not their strength. You were not randomly chosen. You were chosen because you were knowledgeable. That's right. And you had the skills to advance their civilization. And so they took you, and they extracted your labor and your culture. Dr. Joseph Holloway gives us very important information as he goes back and he looks, especially in South Carolina, at the information that comes out of the slave-holding areas. We know that South Carolina was one of the places where African people came in their numbers. And he said, listen, Europeans were specifically asking, and I have the years here, from 1670 to the 1700s, they were asking for Wolof people. They were specifically saying, bring us those people. One, because they were skilled in agriculture, and two, because their women had all the skills that we need to bring up households and makes households strong enough to be able to contribute to a nation. What skills? Dressmaking, food creation and preservation, taking care of children, general household management. They were specifically asking for that. After the 1700s, they began to ask for, in number and in bulk, 70% of the people coming to the United States, people from Angola and the Congo. Because of their perceived brute strength in clearing all the trees that are out there on the East Coast and making that farmland that they could grow their crops on. And they kept them there. Those are usually the people who will end up in the fields. And they asked, because they said they were perceived anyway to be docile, they asked for Yoruba, Fanti people to come and design their hair, manage their houses, and to work as carriagemen for Europeans. They asked for Asante, Bambara, and Fanti people because they were known as blacksmiths from the ancients of times. Because they had wheel-making skills and wagoneering skills and blacksmithing skills. I want you to know that your culture built this culture. This culture is a product of you.
I want to give credit to James Weldon Johnson and John Rosamond Johnson for Lift Every Voice and Sing our national anthem. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, Thou who hast by Thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met Thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget Thee. Shadowed beneath Thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. Arrested Development, freeing ourselves, freeing Thyself, Wane Sabermurti Gentry.
I'd like to say Hotep, and I'd like to thank Dr. Gloria L Peace for having me as a guest speaker here today. I'd like to preface what I've come to speak about by saying that we can never know how far we need to climb until we know how far we have fallen. There are some of us who believe that we have arrived in the celebration of the anniversary of the March on Washington, and that is so far from where we need to be in our understanding of who we are, because we have fallen far, far deeper than arriving at integrating into a society that has really no understanding of what it means to be a fully mature human being. And as Dr. Ben Levy spoke earlier today so brilliantly about Nile Valley civilization, if we want to understand where we must arrive in the knowing of who we are and the expressing of ourselves as human beings, we need to study Nile Valley civilizations, the ancient African people who built for eternity. When we arrive in an understanding of that knowledge, then we have climbed to the heights that is potentiated within all of us, irregardless of the conditions that we suffer from our Ma'afa experience. So I like to speak about arrested development and knowing thyself. And I'm going to speak very briefly about 4 points: complete maturation, culture and education, arrested development, and meditation and attention. Complete maturation is the developmental goal for every sentient being. And in fact, self-development is not only a desired goal, it is a mandated responsibility for every life form seeking to survive and to develop. Now, as it would have it with nature, all of the resources that is needed for our full maturity, for every sentient being, can be found within their inner and their outer environment. But as it relates to human beings, mere survival and self-development is not enough to count for being fully mature. One must be self-realized. One must know thyself, as our ancient African ancestors used to say, as an expression and an instruction. Our ancient African ancestors used to say, worship the gods if you must, but first know thyself. Self-knowledge is not only the aim of life, it is the key to all forms of liberation. It is the solution to all problems, and it is the source of real power. We are to become knowing beings. The ancient Egyptian called it Reiki beings. We have a knowing principle within us that must be nurtured. And we are to know ourselves across all the levels and dimensions of our being. Our purpose for being here is to know, to be, and to express who and what we are at all levels of who we are and what we are. And at the physical level of our being, not much conscious participation is required for us to mature. When we grow in age, we will see physical changes taking place which will reflect maturity with respect to the functionality and the development of this physical body. However, our emotional, mental, and spiritual development requires a great deal of our conscious participation in order to mature at these levels. And it is for this reason that a society of people evolve a culture to instruct and to guide its members so to ensure their complete maturation as human beings. It is culture that guides human beings. And to be, to know, and to act human is a cultural phenomenon which uses as its chief vehicle for the sustainment, the development, and the transference of knowledge down through succeeding generations, a process that we call education. Now, unlike animals who are guided in their knowledge and their behavior by instincts, a human being's knowledge and behavior is guided by culture. We must be enculturated and we must be educated to be a fully mature human being. And education's purpose is not just to provide us with a way to manage the conventions of life, of getting a job and all of that. Our very humanity must be educere, brought forth, to come from within. All that takes place within a culture is what defines your humanity. And you will not find anything that is human taking place outside of culture. Now, with this said, a people living within a society who are not being educated within the context of their own history and culture will suffer from a condition of arrested development, because culture is related to growth and development. And when you are not being educated from your culture, true education, which is not about information coming into your brain, it is about the knowledge that you are being brought forth. Not only your humanity must be educed, but your divinity is to be educed also. You will find out that the divine that you are searching for, you are already that. You need to just learn how to be still and quiet and access the knowledge of yourself as being a divine being. So the problems that confront us as a people is the fact that we do not know who we are. And because we don't know who we are, our consciousness can come under control of other people to serve, for them to dominate, exploit, and even to destroy us. So self-knowledge should be the main aim and focus of life, because it eradicates all problems. All the afflictions that we suffer from, all the addictions, are rooted in ignorance and the knowledge of self, are rooted in the fact that we are suffering from arrested development. And in knowing who we are, we will solve all of our problems. We have forgotten who we are. And so our authentic self must be resurrected. And the chief means by which this can happen is through learning how to discipline our attention through meditation. This is where meditation comes in at. And in the ancient world, and it's still prevalent now in the world today, but much more predominant in the ancient world, meditation was a regular nutrient, just like drinking water, eating, getting sunlight, breathing air, meditating, because you are assimilating unprecipitated cosmic energy when you meditate that's coming from without, and you're drawing energy from within. And through disciplining your attention, you can return back to your authentic self and know thyself and complete your full maturation as a human being. Meditation is key because medi, the root word, means to heal as well as to see. Just as in meditation, in medication, you take medication to help facilitate the healing process. Well, you meditate to help facilitate the healing process, which in healing means to become whole, to be a whole, complete human being. And we are not a full, whole, complete human being until we have returned back to the source and know thyself, know who we are. And I like to introduce 3 words that I'm sure many of you have heard before: Ma'at, Ma'afa, Sankofa. Ma'at was the era where we lived with a knowledge of self and built for eternity. All of the pyramids and temples along the Nile Valley River, those were built by African people during the prosperity of Ma'atian years, where they had a knowledge of self. And then we went through an era of Ma'afa, which we had one of the speakers so brilliantly spoke on earlier today, where we lost the knowledge of self. Terrorism, abuse, afflictions, and now we do not know who we are. What we need to do now is utilize the word Sankofa, which our brother Kwesi spoke earlier in his libation. We need to return to the source and resurrect who we are as a people to solve all of our problems. Right now, we're still in the Ma'afa area. We're still under attack. We still are being abused. We still are being exploited. But we need to move more into a Sankofa era and bring back not just historically what was ours, but that which is even beyond history, our spiritual identity, knowing ourselves. And then we will know that who we truly are is a spiritual being having a human experience. And the way to do that is to discipline our attention, because it is through attention that you become aware of everything that takes place in your mind as knowledge. You become knowledgeable through attention. And attention is the hinge, whereas it can take you up or take you down, depending on what you pay attention to. And meditation is primarily about disengaging your attention from the physical, emotional, and psychological complexes that is producing the ignorance that is causing you to not know who you are. Because you can never not be who you are, because that is the reality, and reality always is. But you can be unaware of who you are. And this is why it's through the disciplining of your attention that you can come into a knowledge of who you really are and thus solve all of your problems. So if we want to solve our problems as a people, it's going to take returning to a knowledge of self so that we can climb back up to where we were in the Ma'atian age and then build for eternity and live prosperous as the kings and queens, divinely as we were then and as we still are now, except for our attention is not in the right place.
Now we have an opportunity to have afterthoughts, and we have with us our sister Angela C. Davis.
First, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Peace for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful panel. This is a great opportunity, and to be a part of a panel with some brilliant people, it's humbling and an honor. The first thing I want to say is that August 28th marks the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. And it seems that we're going to be engaging in a lot of conversations that are going to go back and reflect on the purpose of that march for voting rights, for equal access to jobs, housing, health care, all those things. And it's interesting because these are the same things that we're still fighting for. So I think that in the midst of that conversation, we should be talking about new strategies. What else can we do? What other new things are we going to do to continue that struggle? And as a classroom teacher, I'm definitely going to be addressing these issues with my students in the classroom. The second thing I'd like to say is that whenever I've had the opportunity to be a part of events such as this, and the audience is invited to ask questions or make comments, one of the questions that almost always comes up is in reference to the information presented by the panel, is what can we do to bring this information into the classroom so that elementary school and high school students can be made aware of this history. And I'm always interested to hear what people have to say in reference to that question. Well, I have to say that I am addressing all of those things and more in my classroom. When my students leave me, they are very much aware of who they are and where they come from and exactly what they need to do and what their contributions will be. So this information doesn't get lost. It is being presented. My only issue is that it is not statewide, it is not nationwide. But there are people like me who are out there who are trying and working every day. We're out there on the front lines to educate our children. I've had the honor of being able to read Dr. Ben Levy's dissertation, and I found it very useful, a lot of the information, especially since he talks about the importance of an African-centered education. That is the basis of my educational philosophy, and I've used it over the years to further develop my curriculum. I do have evidence, my own evidence, to show that such a program does work. I would like to read a text sent by one of my kids. It was after school let out. This student's name is Taki. I have to say, Taki is a very quiet young man, very introspective. He's also a football player, very serious student. He always came to class on time, always had his work, and when he worked, he did good work. He rarely asked questions, rarely made comments, but when he did, they were really quite profound, the comments that he made. Now, just because he's quiet does not necessarily mean that he was not listening or paying attention. It's just that at that particular time, he was considering the classroom discussions. But a few days after we got out, this is what Taki said to me. He said, "Miss Davis, this is Taki. I never did get the chance to say thank you. Thank you Excuse me. Thank you for all the things that you've taught me about my history. And you made me realize a lot of things about myself and my people that I never knew. And I've never been happy to be a black person until I took your class. You're a very talented and wonderful teacher, and you made me proud to be a black man. Thank you again, Miss Davis. But again, I have to say, every now and again, I'll get something from my kids, and I do keep up with them. But every now and again, it's a student or a parent that thanks me personally for what I taught my students. And I have to thank my teachers, because I would not be the teacher that I am, the person that I am, if I did not have teachers to teach me what I'm teaching my students. So rest assured, the word is getting out, the information is getting out there, and I am working, and I am so fortunate to have an administration, principals, assistant principals who support me in everything I do, and also a fantastic social studies department that also supports me so that I can help my children, help our children. Thank you.
Thank these griots. You said it brings you to tears when one of your students gives you something. Well, what about if one of your students brings you a PhD dissertation on your way into this building today? This is what Joseph Ben Levy gave his mom today. When you see the fruit of your labor, and I certainly cannot take credit solely, I had a little influence, but it's wonderful when you have friends like Dr. Maisha Hamilton, who spent 20 years looking at the issue of the 13th Amendment. It's wonderful when you have friends like Dr. Asantewa Opong-Wadie, who did a program with me earlier called The Gathering of Utterers. This woman is a profound poet. And so I just thank you for being here and for giving of your services. And Angela, who is so moved by the work that she does, that she bursts into tears.